intro music as well. That's all right. She can wave her hands back there. Don't be knocking those hands down. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for that introduction. We have been doing this stuff a long time. 20-plus years in politics. For Ed and I, Joe, the only thing that hasn't changed in the 20-plus years that I've been involved in Virginia politics is the man who we was previously introduced as America's mayor. I don't know how Lawrence Davies at 81 still looks the same way he looked 20 years ago. Whatever he's been taking, Joe, you and Ed and I need to start taking too. But Mayor Davies, we served together. We served on the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and great citizen of Fredericksburg, great citizen of Virginia. So many people here I've had the opportunity to work with in my various campaigns. Shirley, don't be like shading your eyes there. I'm going to talk about you here, and I know we're going to have the stompers come up a little bit later. I want to apologize on the front end. I want to recognize you forgot one person, Joe, that you didn't recognize, although I don't know if it was on the list. Somebody who doesn't often come out with me to all my political events, and that is my wife, Lisa Collis. Lisa, thank you for being here as well. Former First Lady of Virginia. Some people have asked me a lot recently, now, Mark, which job did you like better, being governor or senator? And being a good politician, I didn't give a straight answer. I said, here was the situation. In my old job, I was called His Excellency, and everybody had to stand up when I came in. I had an army, I had executive protection, I had helicopters, and at the end of each week, I could look back and see what had been done or not done. In this job, my title is the junior senator in an institution that 91% of Americans think is totally broken. And I have to tell you that I, most of the time, believe I'm part of that 91%. I am very frustrated. And so many of you have come up today and been very kind and say, Senator, hang in there. Thank you for what you're doing. It is hard. I've never been involved in a process that is as hard as trying to find that common ground right now with the enormous number of issues that we face in our country. And in fact, I'm going to have to slip out a little early after Ed speaks, because we've got a group of folks up in Prince William County who've been foreclosed, and we've got a number of the banks coming in and trying to help them work through with some remediation for their mortgages. And then I'm actually headed up to New York City. Mayor Bloomberg has got a number of Democratic and Republican U.S. senators coming together, some business leaders, labor leaders, and others, where we hope we can, again, try to build some support for the so-called super committee to really make the hard choices to start taking on that $14.5 trillion debt that we've got to take on at the national level. And I raise this because this is relevant to why we're here today. One, because if we don't deal with that debt, and we don't have a fair approach coming out of Washington, the kind of cuts that are going to disproportionately come from Washington are going to be cuts in education, cuts in infrastructure, cuts in law enforcement, cuts in research. And those will trickle down to local elected officials, and they will clearly hit hard here in Virginia, where we have, through thick and thin, maintained that AAA bond rating that Edd Houck has been such a critical part of standing up for. Now, I know in off-year elections it's hard to get folks out. I think this is a great crowd 10 days out from election. And I want to thank all of you for being here. But that's right, that's a good one. Anybody coming out on a Sunday afternoon. But the reason why this election is so important is Edd Houck, for 8 separate elections, has been willing to stand up and run and bring the values that say every child in Virginia ought to get a fair chance in terms of a quality education. Edd Houck has been willing to say, you know what we need to do if we're going to have a vibrant and prosperous community, we got to have jobs, but people got to have roads and other means of transportation to get to and from those places of work. If you that these were in there, they got to be paid for. And when it comes down to the hard challenges that we wrestled with together, there was nobody stronger than Edd Houck being willing to make the very tough choices back in 2004 when it was going to be, were we going to become like California or New York or Illinois that kind of just runs up budget deficits and doesn't meet their obligations and puts everything on the credit card? Or were we in Virginia going to take off our Democrat hats and take off our Republican hats and put on the needs of the Commonwealth first to make sure that we did balance our budget, that we did invest in education, that we did invest in mental health services, that we made sure that Virginia stayed at the top of the pack? You know, that's why just this week, one of Ed's partners, one of my partners, somebody who I know is in the other party but was part of that group that put Virginia first, John Chichester, came forward and publicly endorsed our Senator Edd Houck. You know, the last thing we want to do is turn Richmond into Washington. I've been in both places. I can assure you that is not what we want to have happen. And if we turn Richmond over to all one party, and not the John Chichester types, because their voices will not be heard in a legislature where compromise is not viewed as an essential trait of government, but compromise is somehow viewed the way it is now in Washington as a sign of weakness. I've got to tell you, some of this crowd in Washington, I don't think they read and support the Constitution that I took an oath to support, which basically says you've got to reach that common ground. You've got that independent House, independent Senate, independent President. We've got the same in Virginia, and time again, in Richmond, we've shown that capacity to lead. And Ed, on every issue over the last 30 years in the Commonwealth of Virginia, every time when Virginia has decided whether it's going to take a step forward, make hard choices, make the right investments, but do it in a financially, fiscally prudent way, Edd Houck has been a leader. Now, I don't know about you, but that is an investment worth keeping. This is a leader we need to keep. Please join me in giving a big Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Stafford, and this large new district welcome to our great friend, State Senator Edd Houck.